Why play Emissary? Well, you might have AD items as well as a lot of money or good econ in the game. You want to play flexible and reach some sort of high cap. You're relatively uncontested because AP is more popular. And the lobby has very good high roll potential, so you think that you can reach some higher level potential with some good cash outs or good 5 costs, and playing Emissary gives you a good opportunity to cap your board very high. However, this comp is very expensive. However much gold you think that you need for this comp, anticipate needing more money for this comp. This is one of the most expensive comps in the game to play. You need money for leveling as well as the units, and the units themselves, some of them are very popular. Because Emissary is a trait that most people can make use of on their boards, they will hold on to these units, so it's very easy to go 8th from just people holding on to these units and not being able to find them all. Additionally, it has a very low stability without upgrades because you're relying on some melee users, which can die very easily if other people have upgrades and you do not. So, just in case you guys want to know, who am I do guides every day, hello, or VOD reviews. I do TFT content every single day. If you've come from one of my videos and you like my videos, please make sure to like and subscribe, because it does help me out as a small content creator. Without much ado, let's go into what is Emissary. So, if we read through the trait, this trait is active when you have exactly 1 or 4 unique emissaries, and that is very, very important to note. Basically, if you play any one particular emissary unit, you will gain that emissary bonus. If you play all 4 emissaries, then the emissaries gain damage amp as well as HP, and you gain all 4 of the bonuses. So it is very feast or famine if you're playing vertical emissary, but otherwise, most people will use the emissary trait to just splash on their board to get a small buff. Each of the buffs that you get is tied to the particular unit that you play. So when you play Ambessa, you get armor and magic resist, up to 14 armor and magic resist if you defeat every one of your opponents in the field. Garen gives HP to the units on his left and to the right of him. So one unit on the left and one unit of the right get HP equal to 12% of his max HP. Nami makes attacks grant 2 bonus mana, so it's kind of like a mini Shojin or a mini mana flow augment. And then Tristana gives 6% attack speed per star level. So the way that you should always think about Emissary, it's really important to note that it's a 1 or a 4 trait. When we're talking about playing Emissary as a board, we're considering the 4 trait in this context of this video. However, if you want to play Emissary, all you need to do is make sure that you have one of these units in. On a lot of boards, if you're struggling to figure out what I should play on my board, a lot of times just playing a random Emissary unit will be very strong. However, if you play 2 or 3 of the Emissary units, it deactivates and you get no buffs. So you always have to decide on whether playing 1 Emissary or 4 Emissary. And this video is going to talk about the comps that are much more structured around the 4 trait. So, when should you play Emissary? The main reason you should play Emissary, you're usually going to be playing around Ambessa carry as well as one other carry. Melee items as well as AD items are very, very important. Emissary is one of the few flexible AD options. Besides actually needing the Emissary units, you have a lot of potential to play many different units on your board and also cap very high. So a lot of times if you have an AD opener and you don't have the conditions to play Twitch or the conditions to play other units, in set 13, a lot of the AD units, there's a certain amount of conditions that you need certain traits in order to make them work. Emissary, besides like the actual Emissary core of the 4 Emissary units, you can play pretty much any background carries, any 5 costs, and you can cap very high. So if you have AD items, it's one of the go-to options for you. And especially if you have melee items that you can make use of on Ambessa, you're pretty much almost always trying to play around Emissary if you have the spot for it. Because the comp is very expensive, you should also consider galaxies or encounters that give you a lot of money. Things like Gold Sub, things like Scuttle Puddle. I usually try to refrain from playing this comp unless I'm in one of these galaxies where there's a lot of money. If you don't have econ, if you don't have a lot of econ, it will be very hard to play this comp, and I will talk a lot about it as we go through examples. Just keep in mind, you have to be rich to play this comp. If you're not win streaking, you're losing a bunch of money that way. Thank you for the follow if you heard that. If you don't have that, you have to be very, very careful, right? Econ is so important with this comp. I cannot stress enough, and you'll hear me say that multiple times, and I will also explain it. Don't worry. It's not just like econ helps all comps. I understand. But this comp in particular, if you're not rich, you will probably go 8th. Additionally, because it's so reliant on econ, having econ augments are also very, very key. If you're not playing in something like Scuttle Puddle or Gold Sub or something that's giving you a bunch of cash outs, you probably want to play towards having something like Slamming, where you're either going to get econ in the form of EXP, like you're either going to level up faster, something like Cluttered Mind or Clear Mind, something like Slamming that gives you EXP, or straight gold augments that just generate gold or give you gold, are going to help you tremendously when you play around this comp. So let's go through the boards, because I think this is the more popular part of the video as always. So when you think about the emissary units, there's basically 4 emissary units, and you can play around each of them. There's different ways to structure your board and play around them, but I'm going to talk about each unit individually first and talk about what they want in terms of their itemization. Now, we did go through a forecast guide and reroll guide and all of that stuff, but here I just want to go through them once again. So if you think about the emissary traits, let's first start with Garen. So Garen, actually we'll go in order of how it appears. So it appears in like this. So with Ambessa, her main thing is that she deals a bunch of AD damage. She has really good AD ratio. She has a little bit of Omnivamp built into her kit, so you don't necessarily have to immediately build Omnivamp on Ambessa. A lot of times the most important item is something like an Edge of Night, because Ambessa dashes through enemies into the enemy backline. So a lot of times she can grief your game, because if she's your main carry, she just jumps in the backline and she gets targeted, she just instantly dies and you lose all your damage. It's very, very scary. So you always want to make sure you have an Edge of Night or some sort of frontline sustain item that will let her live to a certain point. Then you can always go for like the general frontline items. Things like Sterex is fine, just give a bunch of AD. Bloodthirster, give her Omnivamp. Hand of Justice, just balance of damage, Omnivamp. You can also go for stuff like QSS, just make her attack a lot faster and be immune to stun. But there's lots of different builds. Because she has a little bit of built-in Omnivamp, a lot of times I go for something like, I prioritize Omnivamp last. That's not to say that you don't build Omnivamp on her. I just do it last because she has some built in already. So a lot of times I'll just go for like more damage or damage amp. Something like a Giant Slayer late in the game. I think Deathblade is one of her best items, just straight up in stats and otherwise, because she scales so heavily off of AD that she just like absolutely deletes units with damage amp and a bunch of AD from something like Death Cap. But pretty much any items can work. If you're going for like a more standard build, something like, you know, that uses like a mixture of components, something like Edge of Night, Bloodthirster and Giant Slayer is like a little bit of like a go-to, because it just gives her a lot of stats that she really likes. Garen gives HP to the left and the right of him, and he also scales off HP really well. With Garen, the more belts the better. You see a lot of meme builds, I'm sure, that is just like triple Warmogs on Garen. And it's not even that bad, because basically you get a lot of, even though it's like, you know, a bunch of HP, you know, maybe you want some defensive stats and stuff like that. The more HP you have on him, the more he can like give that to units to his left and to his right. So it in turn makes your a lot of your board very tanky, and tankiness is something that might struggle with this comp. Ideally though, you don't necessarily have the ability to make like 100 Warmogs unless you get that prismatic augment that gives you a bunch of belts. So a lot of times you're just trying to find belt items that make sense on Garen. Or additionally, you can just make defensive items if he's your main tank. So you can make stuff like, you know, Dragon Claw, Bramble Vest. They still increase his maximum HP. Things like Sunfire Cape as well, just for utility. But you want to put tank items on Garen and try and put belt items on him to get more emissary bonus effects on him. Nami is rarely itemized, but Nami could just use like AP cast runs, but we won't spend much time on it. And Tristana, I think we talked about Tristana reroll a little bit in one of the reroll guides, but Tristana is somebody that if you are playing around Tristana reroll early, you just want to scale her up with either a bunch of damage amp or a bunch of crit. A lot of times you'll see a build such as Gwinsu, Infinity Edge, and Last Whisper, something like this, where you just get a lot of crit chance because you want her to kill with her ult. So you want her ult to crit and do a bunch of damage that way. If you're not playing around Tristana primarily, then usually you're just putting like bonus items on her, or you're putting damage amp items on her, something like, you know, IE Guardbreaker or Guardbreaker, what's it called, Guardbreaker Giant Slayer. Sometimes she's also really good with Gunblade because she does so much burst damage. If late game, if you get a bunch of stacks off of her ult, then her ult can heal a bunch because it does like a burst damage, so Gunblade's also okay on her. But there's many different builds like that. Now, this is the main board that you'll usually see when you play around Vertical Emissary. This is the flexible 4-cost version. Right now I have 9 units on the board, so on level 8 sometimes it's a bit clumsy. But the idea is that you can make use out of Vi. Vi is pretty tanky as a frontline unit and has good sustain and stun, so she's a good unit to play. Corki is a really good damage dealer, and he's synergized with Artillerist with the Tristana. So the Corki can basically, if you have like full crit items or a lot of like sword items, you can make great use of that. And then we already talked about Ambessa. The idea here is that you basically fit in your core of 4 Emissary, and then you just play as many 4 costs that you can fit in that synergize well enough that they actually get stuff done. When you're playing around this board, it's very important to be able to understand which units do what and what you need for them to be successful. For example, a Corki doesn't really do anything unless you have Corki items, which are a lot of like sword and crit items, stuff like that. Typically works really well. You want to have either a build where the Corki has a bunch of damage amp or has a bunch of crit, because you want the Corki cast to do a bunch of damage. A lot of times Corki is the primary damage dealer on the team, and he typically does the most. So you have to be very careful around playing around Corki and hoping that you hit the Corkis and playing that. When you're itemizing around Mbessa, for example, sometimes you can build her to have a lot of sustain because your Corki is going to do damage. If your Mbessa has to do more damage, then you would want to put more of the damage items on Mbessa. Mbessa is, like I said, you really want Edge of Night, but she's really not that tanky if she dies without Edge of Night. So even with Edge of Night, sometimes she dies really early if you don't have a 2-star. So 2-star Mbessa is pretty key. Garen, we already talked about. You want to build as many belts as possible because it just helps him out with the Emissary bonus of giving it to the unit to the left and to the right. And then Vi works really well because you can synergize these pit fighters and these form swappers within the form of Gangplank and Swain. Gangplank gives you scrap, which helps out the Corki a little bit. It makes him a little tanky so he doesn't just get sniped or take bleed damage or some other form of AoE damage from somebody else. And Swain gives you some extra value because he also is Conqueror, which can help buff the Mbessa slightly. You get Pit Fighter in for Vi, which is really nice. You also can play around Enforcer a little bit. Not that Enforcer is particularly strong, but it does give Vi a little bit more tankiness. Vi, you typically just want to build her kind of like a tank frontline unit. I really like to put Protector's Vow on Vi if I have the opportunity. Something like Protector's Vow is really nice because Vi's stun is really massive, right? So you really want her to get her cast off. So putting a mana item on Vi typically feels really good, at least to me. But you could build her as like a pure damage and put all your melee items on her, similar as you would to build Mbessa. So basically you have these melee carries, which are the form of Mbessa and Vi, and then you have your backline carry, which is Corki, and then you're playing the other Emissary units, which buff your whole team. The reason this board caps so high and is really flexible is because you don't necessarily have to play around Vi or Corki. Depending on which one you 2-star, you can choose to itemize the other one accordingly. For example, let's say you make an IE early. It's not bad to put an IE on Vi because then she just crits with her stun ult and she already has a really strong AD ratio. So it's actually pretty good on Vi as well. Additionally, you can put the IE on Mbessa, but as long as you're making AD items, basically these 3 units right here, there's lots of ways to play around them. There's lots of ways to play around it in terms of like rearranging who gets what items. So whichever one you end up upgrading is the one that will be really, really strong for the rest of your game, basically. Now, Mbessa is a 2, like she attacks from 2 hexes, so you could put Mbessa like backline, but because of the Emissary bonuses, it's just better usually to give Mbessa the HP that Garen gives. So typically this is what your positioning looks like, but you could also put them all in the backline and then just solo frontline some other shit unit, which is totally fine. Now, based on what you hit on level 8, you can also rearrange this board accordingly. Like Conqueror isn't that important and Form Swapper isn't that important. Sometimes Scrap and Pit Fighter isn't important depending on if you hit Vi or not. So a lot of times you're just trying to play around, get the synergies in. These synergies look really nice on the left hand side, but always make sure the synergies that are in are the ones that are buffing the units, right? If you have Vi 1 and you have Mbessa 2-star, for example, you might want to drop Gangplank off your board because you need to fit on level 8 Quick Striker because Mbessa is going to be doing most of the work, right? If your Mbessa is 1-star and she's not doing that much and you have Vi 2-star, Corki 2-star, then maybe drop TF because you don't need to play around TF necessarily if your Mbessa isn't the one doing most of the damage, excuse me. So, why is this board really expensive? If you look at it, ideally you want to have everybody upgraded. You want to have Mbessa upgraded, Garen upgraded, Vi upgraded, Corki upgraded. This board itself is pretty strong because basically you're playing a bunch of quality Forec Costs units and they're all benefiting from the Emissary bonus, right? They're all going to cast a bit faster, they're all going to attack a bit faster, they're all going to have armor, and they're all going to have, or the front ones are going to have more HP. However, a lot of the time, if you don't have a lot of money, what ends up happening is a lot of these units are 1-star. If you look at this board and you look at them as all 1-star units, your Corki doesn't do that much damage. Your Mbessa is too frail to live very long as a 1-star. Garen is also frail as a 1-star. Like not that frail, but he's like your main tank. And then Vi is not at all tanky at 1-star. So what ends up happening a lot of times is if you don't upgrade your melee users into 2-star units, they will just die very, very fast. They will die instantly. That's why this comp is very high roll and you need a lot of gold. because not only do you have to hit the units, you also have to hit them in such a way that you at least get one of them 2-starred in a reasonable manner, especially these frontline units, or else you just don't have a frontline. To remedy this, you could play other variations of this board, but it's not easy. It's not easy by any means. Now, there are other variations of this board, like I was saying before. If you're rerolling Tristana, there is a version of Tristana reroll where you can play around Sentinels, but additionally, you can also play the board around 4 Artillerists and 4 Emissary. So in this case, you're going for Tristana 3 and Urgot 3. This is very situational because not only do you have to be high roll enough to hit the Tristana and the Urgot as well as make it to a high level, you also have to be able to later find Garen and Mbessa, which are going to be hard to find. Like I said before, Emissary is either active as a 4 trait or a 5 or a 1 trait. So you cannot, if you're playing around Tristana, play Nami, Garen, and Mbessa unless you hit all 3 of them. So even if you have a Tristana 3, you can't just say, oh, I'll play Emissary with Tristana, because you're required to find at least 1 copy of Garen and 1 copy of Mbessa, so which makes it very difficult. Additionally, I was talking about how this comp is very flexible and can cap very high. There are many different forecasts that you can play around it. You can interweave the ones. I just showed you one that synergizes really well that a lot of people end up playing towards. But you don't necessarily have to play the exact units that I showed you. You can play any array of units. A lot of times 5 costs are very strong. What's stronger than a 4 cost in a lot of cases in TFT? A 5 cost or even a 6 cost. Wink wink nudge nudge. But additionally, the thing that makes the 5 cost really great is that, like, they get buffed by all the Emissary bonuses. So your board can cap very high, because if you're able to make it to level 9 and find some upgraded 4 cost, there's many variations that you can play. So for example, here, I end up dropping Corki, we play Jace and Rumble, so we can still get the scrap synergies. Rumble's an insane frontline unit, so now our frontline is significantly more stable. We're not relying on Vine and Bessa being like Omnivamp damage dealers while healing type of beat. We have another frontline is really strong. We can get Sentinel in instead, right, and play around Rel, and then we can get a better damage dealer in the form of Jace, that we can just put the Corki items on a Jace. Additionally, because we're playing Emissary, all of the 5 costs are getting buffed. So a 2-star 5 cost that's already a very strong unit, this board is illegally strong. It's insane how much you can cap out with this board, because it's not even a matter of like, this board that I'm showing you here. Any 5 cost, really, you can make work a lot of the time. Typically, the melee frontline 5 costs are a little bit better because you already have melee items. So you can replace the Vi, for example, with Mordekaiser, Savika, or Rumble and transfer those items over pretty easily. Backline AD items are also, backline AD users, are also good. Something like Jace can do an insane amount of damage, and you can just have the form swapper synergy because you're already playing around Gangplank Swain. Really high cap versions of this board, additionally, you can play like 4 form swapper. I think this is one of the higher cap versions where you just play like Elise, Jace, Swain, and somebody else, right? So something that looks like this. But like I said, as long as your core is stable, like if you have upgrades and your front line is stable, you can just find other damage dealers in the form of other 5 cost units or other 4 cost units. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into the fact that you need Corki and Vi, for example. A lot of times when people play this board, they don't even have a Vi. Sometimes your board looks like this on level 8 because you're just playing around Corki 2 and Bessa 2, right? And you just play this board. Or sometimes you don't hit Corki and you only hit Vi and you don't find any Corki because it's super contested. Then you just play Vi instead and you play like the same board. It's very flexible in what you can hit. The problem is just it's very expensive because all the units that matter are going to be high cost units. All the units that do damage, all the units that tank, you're relying on 4 cost units to do all of that. So if these 4 cost units are not upgraded, or if you can't find them in the first place, it makes the comp very, very miserable and very difficult to play. So that's why I always stress you need a lot of gold. And we're going to talk about it even more. As much gold as you think you need. The reason I say you need even more, because it's not a matter of also adding up how much gold is here. You also have to add up the amount of gold that it takes to actually hold all these units on your bench. Because there's so many times where you don't know what to do because you don't hit the units upgraded and you don't hit all of the Emissary units. Imagine if you play this board and you find Vi 2, Corki 2, right? Like you do your roll down level 8, you find Vi 2, you find Corki 2, and you find Garen 2. If you don't have an Mbessa, you can't play Emissary. So what do? You now have to hold all of these units. You either have to play these units and sack Emissary, which is going to make your board weaker most of the time. You have to hold them all on your bench, which is like a whole other problem. Or you have to make some sort of ragtag board and hope that you live long enough to find an Mbessa. It's miserable. right? Because the problem is you not only need to find a Garen, you also need to find an Mbessa, and sometimes you don't find the other missing piece. It's pretty easy to find a Nami and a Tristana and Nami, so that's not usually an issue, but sometimes even those are an issue. There's been games where I don't find a Nami because somebody just has a bunch of Namis, and I roll down, I don't see a Nami for a while, and it completely messes up the flow of the game. So this comp is very easy to go 8th in. The only way you can guarantee that you can transition and play this board is if you have so much more econ than everybody else, such that you can actually play around it. That being said, it is very flexible, so there are many options. Right? We haven't even talked about playing Watcher for Garen, but you can easily fit in a Watcher unit in your mid game if you don't hit any of the other units. You can easily fit in a 5 cost. If you find any 5 cost, you can usually just throw them in and make it really strong. You can also play around form swappers. The possibilities are endless. I say that the typical one that you usually see is this one with Mbessa. This is like the go-to board that you usually probably have in your team planner. And then you decide to drop and switch out units on level 9. So if you hit like a Jace, you can drop out one of the form swappers. If you hit a Mordekaiser, you can drop out one of the form swappers. But typically you need in the... or if you hit like a pit fighter or another frontline unit, you can drop Vi sometimes. That's just how the board works in general. So now, early game boards. We're not going to go too much into early game boards because I do want to show a little bit more of the VOD review this time around. But with early game boards, it's pretty much any AD opener. A lot of times you can play it out of Conqueror opener. So if you have a Swain and a Gangplank, and you play like an early Swain Gangplank build, you're pretty good. You can play it from an early Tristana build where if you're like, you can decide either Tristana reroll, or if you don't hit a lot of Tristanas, you can use the econ and generate to then go to a higher level. You can also play it from like something like a Snipers. Snipers is really conditional on hitting a Bruiser emblem a lot of the time, or playing around Twitch with all of the experiments, so it's a really hard board to play if you don't have certain conditions for it. But if you have any AD items, so a lot of times, like, let's say you start the game off and you slam an IE, right? IE is good on Tristana, it's good on Corki, it's okay on Mbessa, it's okay on Vi. You can play a lot of different units with IE. These are things that you can play basically any of these backline units and structure your game plan in such a way that when you actually get to level 8, you can then transfer those items and play around Emissary. Of course, having Emissary units early mat is pretty nice, but it doesn't really matter is what I would say. You can also play around Scrap and transition into this board. You can play around Artillerist and position into this board. But any type of AD opener, just try and tempo, keep your HP high, and then once you have a good high HP, you can then pivot into this whole melee frontline build. Another one that's really underrated that you can play towards is Family. I do it a lot. Family, to me, is not that good. I don't like playing around Family that much. But if you play Violet early, she's still good on stage 2. She's pretty strong on stage 2. So if you have like an early Family looking game, something that looks like this, for example. I just need powder. 1 second. Right? If you have your early Family game, and then you just make like, for example, like IE, Hodge, like, like you put all your AD items like Sterex, I don't know, Edge of Night. Let's just pick items here. Hodge. I want Hand of Justice just for illustrative purposes, right? Like you have your melee / AD items on a Violet early in the game, and then you can have your tank items on a Vander. You can actually transition a board like this into Emissary pretty easily, because if you're making frontline melee style items, they work really well on both Mbessa or other pit fighters. Additionally, when we're talking about these boards, you could also go vertical into traits. Sometimes you play 4 Emissary, 4 Conqueror. Sometimes you play 4 Emissary, 4 Pit Fighter. It does depend on what you hit. Just make sure that you're always keeping in the 4 Emissary because it's quite important. So, conditions for success. We talked about it a lot. Money, econ, riches, levels. You need all of it. You need as much gold as possible. As much gold as you think you need, you will need more. Because you have to account for the fact that you have to level. You have to account for the fact that you need to find both Garen and Mbessa. You need to account for the fact that you need to hold on to unit pairs on your bench. You have to hold on to 5 costs. You have to hold on to the Emissary units. There is so many things that are going to be on your bench. You will get dizzy. It will be miserable. You need econ. If you do not have gold, you cannot play this comp. Do not think, I have like 50 gold level 8, I should be fine. No, you need more than that. Trust me, it will always be bad if you don't have money for this comp. Second, AD opener and items. If you have AD opener, sometimes you're just forced to play towards AD. This is one of the more flexible options because there are multiple carries that you would have, so you can stabilize around whatever you hit, so long as you hit the Emissary core. Also, you want to be relatively uncontested, or at least have Garen or Mbessa. If you hit a carousel and you get a Garen or an Mbessa early, that's half of the puzzle piece. If you have both of them early, then there's no risk of you not being able to play Emissary. Additionally, good melee items are good, and you have to have the ability to manage a stressful bench. The bench does get really stressful with this comp, which I'll try and show you in the video. Additionally, going level 9 is pretty important because if you want to actually play for a first with this comp, going level 9 and playing any legendary will cap out your board very high. So, now we have a small example gameplay towards the end of this video. So this is me, I don't know when it is, let me try and rearrange it. I'm doing the VOD review via Twitch here. I don't have it downloaded because I forgot. So this is a game, I'm just going to skim through it. I'm going to talk about like the thought process as well as the augment picking and how I play around it. So here I have an opener that looks very similar to Family, right? I have a Violet 2. I scout around. I'm deciding what should I play. I don't like to play Family that much. I don't think it's that strong. I enjoy playing it more in a situation where I actually have like a good spot for Family. So here I don't think my spot is particularly great. I don't have that many Violets, so I'd rather just tempo. I hit Mentorship here. I just want to be strong and win as many rounds as possible early game, and then I'll decide whether or not I play Family. Mentorship is probably the strongest thing I can hit because I have Evander, so all my 1 costs will get buffed. So I play around Mentorship. I make my melee items because I'm playing around this Violet. And I'm going to skip a little bit here. But basically, there's not much to know. I'm just going to play around Family, Watcher, like all of like the same way you would play a Family reroll. I'm just going to play around that opener because it's an AD melee opener. And then we're just going to go through this game, as you can see. All of stage 2, I'm basically going to win most of stage 2. I think I win every fight stage 2 except the last one. I'm not sure if I win the last one or not. Okay, I think I win every fight here. I make Sunfire Cape. I'm just trying to play tempo. So I make Sunfire Cape off of Carousel, and I have a Hand of Justice, which is a melee item. As you can see, I'm just scouting around. And then on 3-2, I think I'm not sure if I take an Econ Augment or if I just take like another Augment for power. Little Buddies, Blazing Soul, I take Unleash the Beast here for sure. So Unleash the Beast is another melee Augment, so it just helps out. I don't really want to play around Artillerist from this spot because I haven't been scaling up a Tristana. So here I just play around Unleash the Beast. It gives me another item. Hopefully it makes me strong. I make IE. I have really good AD items. So I have a completed AD item set. I have Hodge, IE, and Sterek. So I can put that on 1 unit. Additionally, I have this Sunfire Cape. So I have 1 tank item at least. And then I just play out this stage. I think I don't know if I win this stage or not. But the main thing is that because I'm win streaking so many rounds, I am very rich, right? If you look at my econ right here, I am level 7, 60 gold, and it's not even neutral round. On neutral round, I am level, let's see. On neutral round, I am level 7, 70 gold. I am very rich right now. I have a lot of gold to work with. That is why I'm considering playing this comp, because my stage 2 went really well. Because my stage 2 went really well, I have a lot of econ that I can hit this board. It is very important to have econ when you're playing around this board. As you can see, I'm also very strong with Mentorship. Mentorship works really well with this comp because you already want to play a 5 cost more than anything. If you can find a 5 cost and you can just buff all of the 4 cost Emissary units, you get a really, really strong power spike, which is very nice. Look at my items. I get an Edge of Night. So I immediately slam Edge of Night because I know that I'm playing around Mbessa. It's make or break here if I play or not. I have additional melee items and or frontline items, so I will decide whether or not I do those. Here I level because I think I'm a little bit contested in the lobby. So I level to 8 here and I roll a little bit. Obviously, I didn't roll that much gold, but I'm doing 1 send this turn, and then next turn I'm going to send it again. My board is also a little bit expensive because I have a lot of upgraded units. So I'm just trying to find as many copies of the units that I require as possible, just because I'm contested, right? As you can see, this is what happens with the bench a lot of the time. So right now, what's my problem here? Look at my bench. What's my problem? I have 2 Garens, I have 2 Mbessas, I have 2 Tristanas. Who am I missing? I also have a Corki, but check this out. I have 2 Corkis, right? So look at my bench and think about my bench and think about my board. A lot of times, this is what happens with the comp. Your bench is more expensive than your board. My board is a bunch of 1 cost and 2 cost units. My bench is 2 Garens, 2 Mbessas, a Corki, and a Tristana. Like everybody, like look at the gold. Look how much gold. Like I didn't even roll that much, right? I was looking for 1 copy of each. I have everybody paired. But you know what I'm missing? I'm missing Nami. I don't have Nami right now. So I can't even play any of these units. It's like, why don't I just put Garen on my board? Because I don't have Nami. I can't activate Emissary. Because I can't play them. It's so stressful. Like, now I just gotta hope I'm 0 gold because I hit so hard. But, like, I don't, like, what am I supposed to do here? I'm still winning the round, by the way, because I'm strong. But that's why I sent it early. I know I rolled only 30 gold, but technically it's going to be like I rolled 40 gold because I sent it 1 turn early and I'm going to get 10 gold this turn. I could have waited a turn. I would have had 5 extra gold. So basically I sacrificed 5 gold by rolling a turn early. But I think that I was really contested in this lobby. So I ended up deciding, hey, I should roll early here because I need to find at least 1 copy of these units. Garen is hard to find because a lot of AP comps also play Garen. Anyways, we find our Nami. Now we can actually pivot our board and we'll be fine. So we get to pivot our board here. I take the augment that gives me 2 Forec Costs because I say, you know what, it's a support item. My other options weren't particularly great for gold augments, right? It's either more gold, cloning facility, which isn't that great because you have to position around it, so I can't position well with the Garen, or teaming up. So I take teaming up and it gives me Garen 2, which is just really high roll, but it's fine. And then as you can see here, I now pivot into Emissary. I pivot into my 4 Emissary. I get a ZZ Rot, which is pretty cool because the ZZ Rot's going to get the bonuses from the other like effects, right? It's going to get the bonuses from the Emissary. So here, I basically just play all of my Forec Costs. I have Mbessa paired, Corki paired. I hit Garen 2, and now I'm able to pivot my board. But that's what I mean, right? I'm playing it from very far ahead. I have a lot of HP to work with. I rolled early to make sure that I find at least 1 copy of Garen, 1 copy of Mbessa. I end up high rolling that I find a lot of copies of each of them. But as you can see, that's what happens a lot of times. Like, imagine if you don't find a copy of Mbessa, then your bench is just really expensive. You're holding a bunch of Forec Costs. I'm not even holding Vi. Sometimes you hold both Corki and Vi because you're not sure if you're going to play Vi or Corki, right? In my mid game, as you can see, I didn't hit anyVis. So I'm not playing around Vi. Instead, I just have a Watcher in. I have this, what's his name? I have Vanderin to help buff my Garen. But as you can see, eventually I find a Rumble, right? I pivot to play Rumble over like the other units. Rumble is very, very strong here because I have mentorship. So I'm going to get extra HP and attack speed on all of my Forec Cost units. Because I'm paired on so many units, I'm also going to be rolling really aggressively on this stage just to make sure that I hit like everything that I want to hit. Eventually you want to make it to 9 to play around your 5 costs. As you can see, there's a little scout. You can see that there's multiple people playing around Mbessa. That's why I rolled a turn earlier, because my econ was good enough that I said I'll just split the difference and try my best to hit early. And this game ends up being a second by the end of it. I think I lose to Lone Hero Lux at one point. I play around a Warwick. I find a Warwick, so I play Warwick for a couple turns. But then I realized Warwick wasn't doing anything in terms of the damage report. So eventually I find a Jace 2 later in the game, and this is what I was saying before. You don't have to be pigeonholed into playing one particular version. I'm just playing 5 costs that I find. So I have a Corki, I have a Jace in the front line, then I also have a Rumble in the front line, right? The Rumble positioning is a little bit weird, but the reason the Rumble is positioned as such is because I just need to give mentorship to all of my 4 cost units. So the Garen and the Mbessa, namely. So anyways, because I'm really rich, I'm very strong. I make it so that like my whole board is pretty strong. And then I think the game just ends with me losing 2 Lux. I end up going second in the lobby. I win most of the fights. I just lose against Lux every single time. So the reason that Lux is really strong is that Lone Hero Lux tech. The only way to beat Lone Hero Lux is to have somebody like a Caitlyn or a Sniper or like an AoE unit that then kills her before she gets the Lone Hero proc. This is like some cheesy tech if you haven't seen it. Maybe I'll make a video on it one day, but I think most people have seen it by now. If you hit the augment Lone Hero, which is a silver augment, you just go BT double Archangels on Lux and then she's just unkillable. She just shields herself infinitely and like literally nothing can kill her. So you know, I just end up here going second, but that's fine. That's what we expect to do. But that's like the idea of what you play, right? You take an AD / melee opener, right? You convert it. You have to roll with a lot of gold. So here, you know, it was pretty high roll, 30 gold. I would recommend even more gold. But as you can see, I was able to 4-1 it and roll around 30 gold. Which means like a 4-2, I would have rolled 50 gold. And even then, I didn't find a Nami, right? I could have easily not found an Mbessa. I could have easily not found a Garen. This game was already high roll. And you can see how very easily things could have turned very sour. Because I'm stuck playing like whatever ragtag board I had ahead of time, which is like around these units for much of my mid game. Anyways, that's Emissary. Hopefully I explained it well enough. Just know gold. That's the only thing you should think about when you play this comp. Is I need a lot of gold. It's very flexible, very strong. You cap very high. right? I'm not saying you can't be strong. You will be stronger than most people in the lobby for sure. It's a game-winning comp. It's one of the strongest comps in the current patch. You just have to make sure that you are far ahead of the lobby in terms of either tempo or gold, just to make sure that you hit your units relatively uncontested. If you're contested, you're forced to roll earlier. Just be very, very careful, right? Be careful. That's all I will recommend. It's not an always food because you have to have the gold to do it. If you're really poor, you won't be able to play this comp. That's just the main thing. Your bench is gonna be too full. You're gonna be holding too many unit pairs. Your bench is gonna be more expensive than your actual board because you can't pivot into the actual emissary comp until you have 4 emissary. It's very difficult. However, it is very rewarding and it's also very fun because there's lots of different units you can play with the emissary core. So I recommend trying it. I recommend having fun with it. If you're playing something like Scuttle Puddle or Loot Sub or anything where it's giving you like a bunch of gold, like Gold Sub as well, the Caitlyn encounter, those are all great choices where you should just think, oh, head clicks, like, I got it, I can play Emissary this game. I would recommend it in those types of encounters. Anyways, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day, and see you guys tomorrow. I'm not sure what kind of guide I'm going to do. I want to do like a rank up guide, a general rank up guide. The next how-to guide, as per one person in my comment section, is going to be Enforcers. So I'm going to talk about Enforcers a lot. That's going to be the next one whenever I get back to this series. If you want to see one, please make sure to comment below and let me know. Bye.